this 30% tax credit, that extra 30% is really what allows the solar investment to pencil out to where it's a profitable investment for the homeowner. The only thing capping how much utilities will charge is what consumers will put up with. The problem is that it's an electric monopoly. They tell you what price you pay, and if you don't pay, they shut the lights off. And there's really nothing you can do as opposed to just going solar with your own battery system. There's an assumption that contractors have been marking the solar system up 30% because the federal government is offering a 30% rebate. And that simply is not true. That is treating the customer in a very unfair manner. The customer signed up for 25 years of solar service, not 25 years of payments with a broken system on their roof.
Let's just say that these tax credits, they go away and homeowners who don't get signed up maybe after September or August of this year, they're not able to get in on time. What does going solar look like for a homeowner?
Prices are going to have to go up a little bit because of the loss of this tax credit. If you're looking at the solar as, you want to get the best financial performance out of the solar investment, I think 2025, this is probably the last year where the solar investment really, really pencils out and offers a generous return.
Joe, it's great to have you on. A lot of folks really consider you to be one of the go-to voices in residential solar right now. And, if anybody's plugged into what's really happening behind the scenes, it's definitely you. So I've got to ask, how are you personally processing all of this news about the tax credits potentially specifically for residential solar going away? And, what kind of an impact do you think that it will have, not just on the homeowners thinking about going solar this year, but also the industry as a whole?
Yeah, Jack, and thanks for the opportunity to come on with you here. Been following your channel as well for a while. And it's a great first question because that really is the issue of the day today. There's active lobbying in Washington as we speak. Solar company CEOs, solar industry leaders trying to get this tax credit extended or preserved as much as possible so that the industry doesn't have the rug ripped out from underneath them all of a sudden, where we would have to basically transition in the next 6 months or so. So this 30% tax credit, in many cases, that extra 30% tax credit, which, if you have the federal tax liability, essentially it feels like a refund, as if the federal government is refunding you 30% of your solar system purchase price. Assuming that you've prepaid your taxes on time, you would essentially get that money back after you've made the solar investment. And typically that 30% in markets like where I live on the East Coast, where you have relatively cheap electricity, that extra 30% is really what allows the solar investment to pencil out to where it's a profitable investment for the homeowner within the first 10 years if they're paying cash for the system, or if they're financing the system, to be able to get a monthly payment on the solar financing that is at parity or maybe even a little bit below their electric bill. So I think in terms of, a lot of the solar out there that's being sold, it's being sold by teams that are essentially having to go out and evangelize customers on why they should be investing in solar. And so typically to get a customer like that to sign up and to buy into investing in a solar system, the economics of it have to make sense. And of course, as you know, Jack, most of the solar sold in our industry is sold in that manner. It's not necessarily a homeowner that is determined to get solar and they're researching and they're asking solar companies to come to them. In many cases, you have these canvassing teams that are going out to neighborhoods, telling everybody that has a decent roof that solar is a good investment for you, and here's why, and here's the financial justification. So certainly, I think it's going to hurt a lot of those type of sales operations. But, there's always people that are going to buy something because that's what they want. And I see them commenting in on my YouTube channel too. They'll say things like, look, I'm going to put solar on my house, whether the tax credit's there or not, because it's something that I want. I've been planning this for years. And I think that's probably a healthy thing for the market, Jack, is going back to a more organic supply-demand balance. People that are buying solar because they actually want it, not because somebody, pushed it on them. And so I think, the industry does survive beyond this, but probably at lower volumes than what we've been accustomed to the past 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, certainly. And I really appreciate your take on this. And I think that you have good perspective because for those unfamiliar, Joe actually owned a solar contracting business more than 10 years ago. And so you had kind of been around before the whole sales bro culture, the bill swap pitch, the infamous solar is free ads that are everywhere now. So do you think that this shift, if the tax credits go away, kind of pushes solar back to what it used to be, which is, more about equipment, more about resiliency, independence, and less about just this idea of the bill swap?
I think that's exactly right, Jack. When I got started in solar, the people that were in the solar community, whether it was the contractors or the customers, but it was people that were solar enthusiasts. They believed in the technology, they were into it, or maybe they were just into things for environmental reasons. But they didn't need to be pitched to solar. They didn't need to be pushed into it or to be sold it. They were already bought into the idea of being green or being energy independent. So I would put myself in that group as well. And I do think that, yes, with the loss of the tax credits, it will accelerate a flushing out of what you refer to as like the sales bros culture, or really I would call just the gold rush. People that got into solar for the money, not for the technology or what the technology represents. And so I think a lot of those folks are probably going to have to find a home in another industry that has a more compelling sales pitch or a more compelling commission potential, because solar, I think, is going to be more competitive. Prices are going to have to go up a little bit because of the loss of this tax credit. And I would like to comment on one thing too, Jack, because I see this a lot, and I see it a lot on my YouTube channel and comments coming in, that there's an assumption that contractors have been marking the solar system up 30% because the federal government is offering a 30% rebate. And that simply is not true. The solar installation business is a highly competitive business today, even with the rebates and incentives that are available. For homeowners that are competitively shopping solar, it's not uncommon to get 2 or 3 competing quotes and get those contractors in a bidding war to where they may bid their margins down below 10% or 5%, or in some cases, when you count up all the expenses, some cases these contractors are doing these installations at a loss. So I think there's a misconception out there among homeowners that all solar contractors are marking up because they can afford to price gouge because of the 30% tax credit. In reality, Jack, many of these contractors aren't making any profit at all. And that's a big reason why you've seen a lot of these contractors gone out of business in the last 2 years, since sales have been slowing down as interest rates have come up. A lot of these contractors got caught naked to where their business actually wasn't making any profit. They were just able to stay afloat because their sales kept growing year over year. And that's basically what we had all throughout the 2010s, was 50% year over year growth. But when interest rates started rising, those sales started slowing down, and many of the contractors that were on shaky financial ground just got washed out completely. So, there is a lot of shakeup going on right now in the industry. But again, I think the net result of all of this is that you're going to go back to a more healthy, organic supply-demand balance within the solar industry. There's always going to be people that believe in solar and want to buy it. And there's going to be good contractors out there that run sound businesses with sound accounting that are going to be there to fulfill that demand and should be in good shape long term. So that's my take on it.
Certainly. And I appreciate you mentioning that point about, how installer prices could change for homeowners going forward. I've certainly always offered my insight on this, which is that solar is a volume business. These contractors don't necessarily have the intentions of, per se, a general contractor where they might be into this project with the intention of working on it for a very long time and making a margin of upwards of 20 or 30%. I think that all contractors, specifically in markets where it's very competitive, Southern California, Arizona, where I live here in Florida, there's a big demand for solar, and there's not a lack of solar companies. So they'd certainly have to be competitive with each other. But I guess I'd be curious, let's just say that these tax credits, they go away, and homeowners who don't get signed up maybe after September or August of this year, they're not able to get in on time. What does going solar look like for a homeowner in, let's just say, 2026 without that 30% solar tax credit? Do you think that this is something where homeowners, continue to try to finance, but maybe don't necessarily have those immediate bill savings? Or how do you think a homeowner may approach this investment going forward?
Well, I think if you're talking about homeowners that need to have the financial investment return in a reasonable amount of time, then there is no better time to go solar than right now, or between now and the end of the year. So you can still take advantage of the tax credits. Interest rates are still relatively low, but more importantly, all these tariffs haven't fully kicked in yet in terms of hitting the retail price of a solar system on the street. So there's a number of things, Jack, that are cooking in the next 6 months that are going to push the price of solar up. Again, there will still be people out there that buy it because people buy what they want. At the end of the day, people buy what they want. You see it in automobiles and homes and home improvement. they're not always looking at the bottom dollar, option. But if you're looking at the solar as, you want to get the best financial performance out of the solar investment, I think, 2025, this is probably the last year where the solar investment really, really pencils out and offers a generous return.
Certainly. And I think that, that second part of the ROI of the solar investment is really where the electrical prices are for that specific homeowner. As we all know, the ROI for solar is going to be much higher in a place like Southern California, where a homeowner might be paying upwards of 40 or 50 cents per kilowatt hour, compared to somewhere like Washington State, where, homeowners may be paying as low as 5 or 10 cents per kilowatt hour all in. So I wanted to get your take on one thing, something which I've been hearing a lot from clean energy advocates lately, especially in the wake of these subsidy rollbacks, is that without the support for things like residential solar, commercial solar, wind, and other renewables, energy prices for everyday people could actually end up going up. And, when I look at other places like California and parts of the Northeast, where the demand for electricity is certainly rising fast because more people are switching to EVs, electrical appliances, there's data centers being added to the grid. What do those trends look like, you think, going forward for utility prices, let's just say pre-nuclear, if we're not able to get nuclear in on these grids in like the next 10 years? Like, what do you think it looks like for homeowners going forward as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, Jack. Well, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Is that there's tremendous increase in demand on the electric grid, whether it's for AI data centers, whether it's from electric vehicles and the transition to electric vehicles, and the transition to home electrification. So, as we move away from fossil fuels, let's say for heating our homes or cooking, that means you have more demand for electricity. And then ironically, a lot of the electricity is going to have to come from, fossil fuel burning or natural gas power plants to meet that demand until we can get our nuclear act together. So I think you're exactly right. The electric grid is needing more maintenance. There's also more demand on the grid because of electrification and AI. And so that demand has to be met from someplace, or prices will go up, which will cause people naturally to consume less. But I never subscribe to this idea that, the solution for the solar industry is just for utility rates to go up. So if we just get utility rates up, then the solar investment pencils out better. Well, the reality is, Jack, as you know, a lot of the power companies don't want to take your excess solar now, or they don't want to take it at the same rate that they used to take it, which means that you're still not really getting that same return on investment that you would have back when, for example, in California, you could have signed up for a true one-for-one net metering program. They still have them here on the East Coast. I know where you are in Florida, they still have some generous one-for-one net metering programs. Again, if that's something you're interested in as a homeowner, I think the time to get into that agreement is now, because the trend is, and California really is the trendsetter when it comes to solar and net metering policy. What's going on there now is likely going to happen in Florida and other East Coast states within the next 5 to 10 years. That's what I would expect.
Yeah, certainly. And for me, if there's one big concern that I have, it's that, if solar is no longer this real feasible option for most homeowners, then we've kind of basically just handed all the power back to the utility companies. I mean, what's to stop them from raising rates even more if people no longer have a viable alternative? I mean, I talked about this in a recent video, but, San Diego Gas and Electric, which is this relatively small utility company, compared to like the big national players, well, they're expected to profit, not revenue, but profit just over $1 billion in 2025. And I've spoken to homeowners down there with modest homes, 1,500, 2,000 square feet, and they're seeing bills of like $300-$400 a month because, well, they're paying closer to 45 or 50 cents per kilowatt hour. So my question is, do you think the rollback of the tax credits kind of sends a message to utilities that they can just raise rates more without really as much pushback? That being, the fewer people go solar, they've got a more captive customer base again.
Yeah, well, Jack, I mean, I think the problem with utilities, and of course, San Diego Gas and Electric is probably the worst. I believe they have the most expensive retail electricity on the continental 48 states. But the problem with the utility model that we have right now is that it's a monopoly model. And this scheme was cooked up about 100 years ago when this electric grid technology was just sort of coming into its maturity. But the problem is that it's an electric monopoly, and so they tell you what price you pay, and if you don't pay, they shut the lights off. And there's really nothing you can do as opposed to just going solar with your own battery system and just, if not disconnecting completely from the utility, just sort of using them as the last resort option only. And of course, that's what we're seeing in California, is a lot of homeowners are choosing to install solar with battery storage, even in this current NEM3 world where the utility is not offering you a fair buyback. But many homeowners are choosing to just install enough solar and battery capacity so that they can consume their own solar energy 24 hours a day and not have to deal with the changing utility rate schedule. So, obviously I've been a big proponent of that philosophically. I think, the technology is here now. You can be energy independent on a household level as long as your house gets decent irradiance, good amount of sunlight's hitting your roof. But really, I think the only thing capping how much utilities will charge is what consumers will put up with. And for whatever reason, Southern California, I mean, it's a beautiful place, got beautiful weather, but they put up with a lot there. They put up with a lot to live there in terms of taxes and higher electric rates and just, again, I don't know that would fly here on the East Coast, but consumers seem to be bearing it there, or the ones that can do something about it using solar and battery technology are doing something about it. So at least now they're in control of where their energy is coming from and how much it costs.
Certainly. And if we could kind of switch the conversation a little bit, if there's really one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and if there's one thing that concerns me in particular, I think it's going to be the growing number of customers which essentially become abandoned, meaning that we're looking at homeowners who might be in situations in which their solar systems, which had been installed, were installed by contractors, which have now gone out of business. And as you know, in solar, one of the most valuable pieces of that investment is that warranty coverage, or in the case of a lease, it's that maintenance coverage. So it's the full service, no cost to the homeowner, pretty much costs associated with keeping up that equipment and servicing any labor or equipment warranties if something bad were to happen to the system. So what is your kind of take on what that looks like for homeowners going forward, if that is the case, that a number of these contractors go out of business? And are you worried specifically about, let's just say, homeowners who might be in situations where they have leased or gone out and gotten a power purchase agreement for a system? Considering we've seen these growing bankruptcies from companies like SunNova and, potentially here in the future with Sunrun, with that lease business model pretty much being upended by these tax credits, meaning that these lease companies can no longer claim that 40% tax credit because they not only get 30%, but they also get an additional 10%. That's really the backbone for their business. And I think in the most recent iteration of this bill, that's going to go away effective immediately. They don't even have that sunset until the end of this year. So, what are you thinking that what would you say to those customers who have purchased or leased systems and are kind of starting to get really nervous about whether or not their systems are even going to be supported in the years ahead with servicing and warranty packages that they were so much promised?
Yeah, Jack, that's a great set of questions there. Let's unpack that one piece at a time, because there's a lot to get into there. So I think the first part of the question was about, when a homeowner engages in a 25-year agreement to purchase a solar power system, right? Many times it's via a lease or a power purchase agreement, or they're taking out a long-term loan to pay for the solar power system. Now, typically these systems have been offered with 25-year guarantees from the contractors that, any repairs, the contractor will take care of it. There's a power production guarantee over the course of that time. And so there's this expectation at the time of sale that what I'm signing up for is not just a one-time construction job, but what I'm signing up for is 25 years of energy service from the contractor. Of course, average lifespan of a contractor is about 6 or 7 years. So the idea of a 25-year guarantee, the guarantee is only good, as good as the paper it's written on, right? Or as good as the contractor that's backing it up. And that's what we've seen is so many of these contractors have gone out of business as sales in general have slowed down, leaving homeowners with difficult recourse as far as how to get their system maintained. I mean, they could go out and hire another contractor or bring in a solar service company like Nick Sherman's outfit, Energy Aid. That's mainly what they do is servicing abandoned solar systems. But of course, they have to charge the homeowner for that service. It's not a free service. They have to cover their costs, just like any other home service business would have to do. But what we're also seeing, though, is a lot of this coming back to the finance companies that underwrote the loans. And so when a homeowner has no recourse with the contractor because the contractor went out of business, many of these homeowners are calling up the finance company and saying, essentially, I'm not making any more payments on the loan until you fix my system. And so even though these solar finance companies were not contractually required, and by the way, I should do a differentiation here. I'm talking about solar loan companies, not leases. So with a solar loan company, although the loan company is not legally required to make repairs on the system, they find themselves in a situation where they're compelled to make repairs on the system because they don't want their borrowers to start defaulting. And then the quality of those loans, when they go to sell them off to investors, the quality of those loans is rated lower and lower, which is a critical piece of their business model, is being able to sell these loans. Now, again, a solar loan company is not a bank. They're not lending their own deposits. They're not lending their own money. They're borrowing money from banks, lending it to consumers, using it to fund solar contractors for the installations, and then bundling those loans and selling them off to investors. That business model, in my opinion, is going to fail. And I think it's going to fail in a very big public way in the next 1 to 2 years. I think you're going to see a lot of those big names go out of business. Now, I'm not talking about traditional direct bank lenders. In fact, my prediction is that traditional direct bank lenders are going to take over solar financing, and then hopefully they will bring with them risk management expertise that they've already acquired doing other types of lending, whether it's real estate, automobile, you name it. But Jack, a component of that is being able to recover the collateral in the case that somebody stops making payments, right? You think about it. If you stop making your house payment, the bank takes your house and sells it and gets their money back. Same thing if you don't pay your car payment, the bank's going to take back the car and sell it, and they're going to recover whatever money they can. With solar, it hasn't really been like that. To my knowledge, there has not been any kind of solar panel repossession activity. So if the bank can't convince you to make your payments, they essentially have to wait until you sell your house until they can, enforce their lien and hopefully get paid out of the proceeds of when you sell the home. But average homeowner, I think, sells homes every 7 or 8 years. So if a solar loan goes into default, so the solar finance company may not be able to wait that long to recover their capital. So that, I think that's one issue, right? Is so you've got contractors that are going out of business long before the warranty term expires. You've got solar finance companies that are finding themselves scrambling to keep systems healthy so that their borrowers don't go into default. And then, the quality of the loans that they want to sell to investors in the future goes down. But then you also touched on, Jack, the other issue of these solar leasing companies, and that the business model of these solar leasing companies, like Sunnova, which recently filed bankruptcy, is being able to capture the solar tax credit. And from what I'm being told, is being able to capture the solar tax credit at an inflated value. Meaning that, let's say if you went to a contractor and you wanted to buy a 10 kilowatt system, contractor says, okay, that'll be $250 a watt cash, $25,000 cash. That $25,000 is what the cost basis of your system would be when you claim your tax credit. What some of these leasing companies have done, from what I'm told from my contacts, is they just total up the total number or total amount of lease payments over the entire 25 or 30 years of the lease, which could be triple the cash price to the contractor. And then they're using that amount to calculate the solar tax credit. And I believe what's happening is the federal government now is cracking down on how aggressively they can price and evaluate the cost basis for that tax credit, which is causing these business models to come under pressure. I mean, just in the last year, we saw the Texas Green Lease Company go out of business on this issue. Sunnova just filed bankruptcy. They're probably going out of business. And, there's others, you mentioned Sunrun and others out there that depend on this solar lease financing structure that may find that their business models are unsound as well. But as far as the issue of abandoned systems, I mean, I think it really is unfortunate, though. Now, on the flip side of it, from what I've heard from some of the viewers, is that they intend to stop making payments to Sunnova since Sunnova is no longer going to be in business servicing. So, I mean, time will tell to see if that collateral is recovered by any of Sunnova's creditors. But there's a lot of homeowners out there that think that they just got a free solar system because the company that they owe their payments to is no longer operating, or at least is in bankruptcy protection at the moment. So,
Yeah, I've always heard that other component of the lease contract, which makes the leasing companies a little bit of money, is that they try to increase that buyout price so that it's not a good option for the customer to buy out that lease. Meaning that if a lease company can convince a customer to sign let's just say a 25-year lease at a 3.9% escalator, their intention is to make the majority of that profit, the majority of the money, towards the latter half of that lease, where that 3% escalator or that 3.9% escalator has doubled, if not tripled, the monthly payment of that system, which the homeowner was looking at in that first year. And I think what really concerns me is I recently heard a story about a homeowner in New Jersey, and she had actually leased a system from SunPower. And when SunPower filed for bankruptcy, what they were actually able to do is then sell that lease to another company. Now, she still had to make those monthly payments to that new company, but that new company, in fact, did not assume the servicing and warranty part of the deal, meaning that she had to continue making monthly payments to that company, but that company was no longer responsible for servicing her system. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that that's something that, let's just say Sunrun, who's maybe here or maybe is not in 2032, or is that something that they're able to do?
Well, legally, I suppose they could purchase that receivable or that contract via the bankruptcy process. But I mean, I think it's just common sense to anybody who just heard what you said. That is, treating the customer in a very unfair manner. The customer signed up for 25 years of solar service, not 25 years of payments with a broken system on their roof. So what I suspect is going to happen is you're going to have enough customers like this woman who are going to call their lawyer and say, I've been defrauded. I've been taken advantage of, and we need to go to court and we need to get this, we need to get this lease contract voided or canceled. And I think that's what you're going to see. We're already seeing the lawsuits piling up against the solar loan companies. I think it's only a matter of time until the solar lease companies come under similar pressure. Because again, there's this expectation at the time of sale. Salesman comes in, they show a 25-year projection of how much energy cost you're going to save. That projection assumes that the system is made functional the entire time. It's kept functional. And so consumers, I think, are going to fight back and say, look, we shouldn't have to pay for this. I've got a broken solar system on my roof. The company that put it there went bankrupt. There's another company now sending me bills saying I have to pay them, and the system's not saving me any money on my electric bill. So no, Jack, I don't think that's going to last very long, which is why I said I think the specific solar finance companies are gone within the next 1 to 2 years. I think that business model is gone. Any financing needed for solar, I think, will be taken over by traditional bank lenders.
As it probably should be. So my final question for you, the majority of my audience is homeowners, maybe people who have solar, considering solar, somewhere in the middle, especially right now with all of the uncertainty regarding the tax credits and everything else that's changing, from company closures to financing shifts. What advice would you give to somebody who's maybe just starting the process now? Maybe somebody who's, looking to make the move on solar. They want to get something, started here in the next couple of months. What should they be thinking about when it comes to potentially choosing an installer, picking the right equipment, and maybe deciding on how to finance or even lease the systems so that they just set themselves up for a stress-free, future-proof, long-term investment?
Yeah, great question, Jack. Obviously, lots to consider here. Number one, I would say if you can afford to do so, just pay cash for the system. I know in America, we like to finance everything. The rest of the world is not like this, but it's a uniquely American thing. We can put a financial product around just about anything and make it look good on paper. But now, if you can afford to pay cash for the system and you live in a market that has a good net metering program, I think solar is a good investment for you. Next question, of course, is choosing the right contractor. Now, in my opinion, the contractors that have been the most stable, and I predict will continue to be the most stable, are the companies that did not try to grow nationwide overnight, but companies that have been in business for several years. Maybe they only focus on 1 or 2 or 3 different metropolitan areas, or in the case of a smaller state, maybe they're only servicing 1 or 2 states, but they've been doing it for many, many years. These tend to be family-owned businesses, ideally multi-generational family-owned businesses where they've already gone through one transition of the founder having to to get things mature enough where the business could be handed off to the next generation. These are the kind of companies I think that are going to continue to do well as far as a contractor. And I would say probably the same thing about a general contractor, right? A building contractor, is that's what you want to look for in a company. The companies in solar that got into trouble and then got into all these bankruptcies are the companies that tried to go too far, too fast, because again, they were just thinking dollar bills, gold rush mentality. They weren't really in it, in my opinion, they weren't really in it for the right reasons. And then I would say also as a homeowner, if you're going to get into investing in a solar system, don't do it because you think the solar system is going to make you rich or it's going to be this excellent investment. Like, in other words, don't do it just for the numbers. But if solar is something that you believe in, the technology it's incredible how mature the technology is now compared to where we were just 5 or 10 years ago. And so if solar is something you believe in and you want to be energy independent, then by all means, choose a right contractor, install with good quality equipment. And frankly, if you do want the investment to perform well, these next 6 months are probably the best time to do it because you're likely going to lose some of the tax credit benefit, and you may have to deal with slightly higher prices due to tariffs by the end of the year. So that'd be my advice to them, Jack.
Certainly. And for those who are listening to this, maybe at a later date, we're filming this on the 19th of June. So at the moment, we've had only really the first revision of the Senate bill. So we're kind of yet to see exactly where this goes. Who knows, maybe in a week from now, solar tax credits could be back. But Joe, any last words to people who might be watching this, people who might be in a position where they could potentially get in contact with somebody who might be making a decision on this bill? What would you say to those people or just the general audience as kind of some last words?
Yeah, well, I would just say last word on the bill is, we know that eventually the solar industry has got to wean itself off of government subsidies, especially seeing how some of those subsidies really were abused, in my opinion, based on what I'm hearing about some of these leasing companies. But eventually we have to get the industry to where it can stand on its own. And so I think that the latest proposal from yesterday, where we basically would step the subsidies down over the next 3.5 years. So at the end of Trump's term, those subsidies would be sunsetted. I believe that's going to be a great alternative compared to just ripping the rug out from underneath the industry and all the job losses that would come with that. I do believe Republicans want to get the solar industry off of subsidies. I also believe that they do not want to create massive job losses, particularly in the skilled construction trades, which is where those job losses would hit the hardest, which frankly, just putting my political lens on, I think that's a voting block that they do not want to upset. And that, probably was crucial in swinging the last election. So that's what I would say, on that matter. But, again, the solar technology is in a great spot in terms of maturity. The solar works, particularly if you're going to install solar with battery storage and not have to deal with negotiating buybacks with your power company every few years. I think it's a great time to go solar, especially while you can still get that full 30% credit.
Well, Joe, thanks for coming on the podcast. If anybody's subscribed to my channel but not subscribed to Solar Surge, I don't know what you're doing. Joe, I'm jealous of your channel. You make great content. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah, Jack, thanks for having me. Honored to be invited on here as your guest. And of course, you've been doing great work over at Jack the Solar Guy channel as well, putting out great educational content for homeowners. And philosophically, I'm 100% aligned with that. Let's make sure that, the people watching this, people that are considering solar, they go into this with their eyes open. They avoid these common scams and pitfalls. And so following channels like yours is a great way to do that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Joe.
All right, Jack. We'll see you next time.